A hidden medical bill after my wife's Vegas getaway led directly to me serving her divorce papers. Welcome, welcome, welcome to another incredible true story from our space. The old saying goes, what happens in Vegas stays in Vegas, right? Not always. Today on our space, we're exploring a tale where what someone brought back from a trip changed everything. Sometimes a burning sensation isn't just about desire. When people say a single moment can alter your life, they're probably describing my situation. It's astonishing how one small document found in my wife's handbag completely flipped my world upside down. I am a 37-year-old man who married my university love a decade ago. Before that, we had been together for 6 years, meaning our relationship spans 16 years overall. I'll refer to her as Dove, also 37. She was my peer during college, and I truly considered her my soulmate. She genuinely felt like one. About a month ago, Dove's friend was having a lavish wedding celebration in Las Vegas. I also received an invitation, but I had a crucial work commitment that very week, so I couldn't attend. It was an elaborate affair, lasting a full week. When Dove returned from the festivities, she seemed unusually quiet. I asked her if everything was all right. She explained she was simply exhausted from the week-long celebrations. This seemed reasonable to me, so I gave her the quiet time she needed to relax. However, I grew concerned as Dove's behavior became distant towards me. She wasn't just quiet, she became irritable. She started ignoring me and grew agitated during every conversation. Our intimate life also suffered, almost ceasing entirely. Whenever I tried to initiate, she would snap at me, claiming she wasn't in the mood. It had been nearly a month since her return from the wedding, and we hadn't shared a single intimate moment. If that wasn't enough, I discovered something in her purse yesterday that filled me with dread. A hospital bill. Dove had undergone an STD screening the very next day after getting back from the wedding. Isn't that strange? Why would she do that? And why didn't she tell me about it? I knew it implied something obvious. I loved her unconditionally, but I wasn't naive enough to overlook such a significant warning sign. I wasn't ready to confront her about my discovery yet, but before I did, I wanted to gather complete information regarding the STD test. I refused to approach her with incomplete facts. I valued my marriage and my connection with Dove, and I didn't want to jeopardize it on an impulse. I researched the topic extensively, and during my search, I stumbled upon a forum where many men and women had shared similar experiences, finding their partners secretly getting STD tests. More often than not, it was linked to infidelity. That's why I'm here to share my own story and find out if I'm reading too much into this. I feel ashamed to admit this, but I also peeked at Dove's phone a few days ago. I scrolled through all her messages and call logs but found nothing suspicious. Everything seemed clear. I also checked her social media, and it too was clean. I don't know whether to feel bad for doubting her or reassured that I'm being vigilant. I considered reaching out to the friends who attended the wedding with Dove to see if anything unusual happened there. But it was Dove's childhood friend's wedding, so none of our mutual college friends were present. I'm acquainted with her school friends, but not well enough to inquire about anything without Dove's knowledge. The situation felt so peculiar because, in our 10 years of marriage, Dove had never given me any reason to doubt her. We had always been completely open with each other. To add to this, I forgot to mention that the bill showed she made the appointment the day after her return, but the test date was yesterday, and the report was due in a week. Dove's behavior had been worrying me since she got back. I checked her phone a few days ago but found nothing. Yesterday, when Dove came home after the test, she appeared utterly drained and tense. My suspicions grew when she carefully hid her bag inside the wardrobe. Usually she just leaves it on the table or couch. I pretended not to notice, but I was closely observing her every move. When she went to the bathroom to shower, I checked her purse and found the hospital bill for the STD test. Honestly, if she felt the need to conceal it, she had done something she felt guilty about. The only other reason she would get tested for an STD is if she suspected me of cheating. On top of everything, the timing was just too suspicious to be meaningless. Update 1. Hello everyone. After reading the comments on my initial post, I realized I hadn't provided any background information about myself or Dove. I didn't think it was relevant at the time. Nevertheless, I've responded to some of you in the comments, but for general understanding, let me add a few details. Dove and I both graduated from the same university. We are both software engineers working for different IT companies. We have a 6-year-old son. Financially, we lived a stable, quite comfortable life. We were a very happy family until now, until Dove decided to ruin everything. After discovering the medical bill for an STD test in Dove's purse, I was restless. The comments on my last post, as well as the stories from other individuals, all pointed to one conclusion: Dove had cheated on me. Initially, I wanted to wait until the test results were back before confronting her, but I was suffocating internally. I couldn't hold it in any longer. Dove also noticed my changed behavior. The day I made the post, she even asked me if everything was okay. I just nodded and forced a smile. She probably thought I was reacting to her rude demeanor. So, a day after my post, we sat at the dinner table. As we began eating, Dove again inquired if I was doing well. I nodded yes, but after a moment, I couldn't restrain myself, and I blurted out, "How was your STD test?" She looked at me, stunned. I repeated, "Yes, that STD test you had a few days ago." She turned pale and asked how I found out. I told her it didn't matter. Then she uttered the most predictable line, "I can explain." I stared at her directly and told her to do so. She sighed and took a deep breath while I continued to watch her patiently. She started crying. The moment she began sobbing, my heart sank. I realized my suspicions were true. Dove held my hand and asked me to trust her. I told her I could only trust her if she explained, but instead of speaking, she pulled her chair closer, leaned on my shoulder, clutched my arms tightly, and wept. I let her emotions pour out. In the 16 years of our relationship, I had never let her cry alone. Even at her slightest tears, I would hug and comfort her. But this time, I sat completely still. She tried to come closer and hold my arms as tightly as she could, but I didn't embrace her back. I sat there, as cold as a stone. Finally, when she finished crying, she released my arms and confessed everything. It happened during her friend's bachelor party, part of the week-long wedding festivities. The first 2 days were a bachelor trip to Vegas. The event planner had arranged for strippers, male escorts, and all sorts of things. That day, I learned so many new terms I had never heard before. She told me that the bride and her other friends enjoyed all the services from the very beginning on day one. But Dove resisted. Her friends pressured her, but she didn't give in. She watched the bride and her other friends having a thrilling time, fulfilling their fantasies with those escorts, but she held back. I usually believed her, as she was never a liar, but this time it was incredibly difficult for me to fully trust her account. I asked her if she did it because she felt out of place. She said her friend, the bride, convinced her that she hadn't been with any other man in 16 years, and therefore, she needed to taste new blood. Her friends described how these escorts used various techniques to provide them with new edge pleasures. Dove still didn't yield, but her friend persuaded her to get an intimate massage. Dove finally succumbed to the peer pressure and agreed to the massage. She thought a massage wouldn't count as cheating, and she could also avoid the pressure. However, the masseur was an escort. After the back massage, he began undressing her completely. She resisted, but he claimed it was an intimate massage, so she had to disrobe. She confessed to losing her self-control during the intimate massage and gave in. One thing led to another, and she was unfaithful to me. But this wasn't the end. When Dove told her friends about her encounter with the masseur, they cheered her on and encouraged her to explore further. They also assured Dove that it would remain private and I would never find out. Dove thought she had already crossed the line and cheated. So, there was no point in resisting further. She decided to explore her fantasies more fully. I was glad that she confessed everything honestly. She knew I wouldn't forgive her, even if it had only happened once. I just sat there, numb, trying to absorb everything Dove said. I knew my life was about to change. The woman in front of me was the love of my life, which is why her betrayal inflicted such profound pain. Dove nudged me to speak, as I hadn't uttered a word since her confession. I buried my face in my hands. She tried to hold my hand and lift my face, but I resisted. Finally, when I looked at her, I said I was going to file for divorce. She was shocked and pleaded that I shouldn't make a hasty decision because we had a son. I yelled at her to stop pretending to care about our son and our family. If she had the slightest concern for them, she wouldn't have done what she did. I grabbed my car keys and left the house. She tried to follow me, but I brushed her off. I drove to my friend's place, who lived alone. He had recently gone through a divorce himself. That's a separate story. Anyway, I drank until I passed out. The next morning, I called in sick for work. My friend went to the office while I relaxed on his couch, searching for divorce attorneys. I came across a lawyer who had been my junior in school. He was connected to my Instagram, so I messaged him. He responded within a few hours. I requested a call. He sensed the urgency and desperation in my messages and called me back within 30 minutes. His next available appointment slot was about 4 days later, but since I knew him, he asked if I could meet him late that evening after work. I readily agreed. Instead of meeting at his office, he suggested we meet for a drink. So, the evening Dove confessed her infidelity, and the very next evening, I was sitting with my lawyer, discussing my divorce. He advised me to sleep on my decision and see if my emotions subsided and if I decided to give her a chance. I told him I was making this decision with a clear mind. I outlined my divorce terms to him, and he assured me he would begin the paperwork immediately. I asked him to expedite the process because I wanted to get it over with as soon as possible. Anyone who heard me might have assumed I was acting impulsively, but I wasn't. I loved Dove, but not more than my self-respect. I told him I had trusted Dove with my life, and if I was making this decision, it was undoubtedly serious. I couldn't let her get away with cheating. The next day, I returned home in the afternoon. I thought she would be at work, but she was there. She had become wretched in just the last few days. As soon as she saw me, she rushed towards me and tried to hug me, asking where I had been for the past 2 days and why I wasn't responding to her calls and messages. I wanted to push her away, but she looked so pale and fragile that I couldn't. I allowed her to hug me, but I didn't touch her. I stood rigid. She kept apologizing, but I remained unmoved. She held my face with her hands and urged me to speak. She said my silence was agonizing her. I asked about our son. She said she had dropped him off at my parents' house for a few days. I freed myself, went to my room, and locked the door. She wouldn't have let me pack if I had allowed her in. I packed some clothes, my laptop, tablets, and essentials, and quickly left the house while she was in the kitchen. She followed me outside, trying to stop me, but I didn't look back and drove away. I checked into a hotel and then went to my parents' house to see my son. I wanted to tell them everything, but I held back because I had another plan in mind. It's been almost a week now. I'm working from the hotel. I've received permission to work remotely for this month. Dove tried to contact me through every possible means. Calls, texts, voicemails, showing up at my workplace, dropping by my friend's house, and the local bars and restaurants I frequently visited. One of our mutual friends called me today and asked if I was all right. He said Dove had been searching for me all over the city. I asked him if she had explained why. He said that to anyone who asked, Dove was telling them I left the house after a serious argument about something. I said yes. I was safe, but I needed some time to calm down. A few hours ago, I called my lawyer to follow up on the divorce papers. He said they would be shipped to me in the next few days. I'm waiting until the divorce papers arrive. I'll provide an update once I resolve this matter. Update 2. It took me a while to post this update, but I wanted to finalize everything before doing so. This will be my final update. So, 10 days after the D-Day, the divorce papers arrived. It was Saturday. The next morning, I went to my house. The situation was unchanged. Dove lay lifelessly on the couch while my son played in the living room. He ran towards me and hugged me, as we hadn't seen each other in the past week. This time, Dove was rigid. She didn't hug me. Instead, she gave me a cold stare. I played with my son for a few minutes, then left him alone and sat on a chair. Dove looked at me with a blank expression and asked what I wanted. I smirked at her question without speaking. She asked if there was anything she could do to improve things. I remained silent. After a while, she said, "Look, I know I've hurt you and ruined everything, but I feel terrible about it. I accept what I did. It was a serious offense. But you need to see that I could have skipped the STD test, and you would never have known. But I took the test for your safety and avoided intimacy to protect you. I love you, and I'm sorry for what I did. But you also need to acknowledge that I honestly confessed the truth when I could have easily fabricated lies. So we need to resolve this situation instead of running from it. Tell me if there's anything I can do to fix this." I told her yes. I told her to confess her infidelity in front of both my parents and hers. She gave me a stern look. I said, "What, you can't do it, right?" She took a deep breath and said if this was something that would make me happy and satisfied, she was willing to do it. I told her to go ahead and invite them for the evening. After staring at me for a couple of minutes and seeing the coldness in my eyes, she picked up her phone and called her parents and mine, one by one, asking them to join us that evening. After the call, she looked at me with defeated eyes. I took a shower while browsing on my iPad. She entered the room and said she had prepared lunch for us. I wanted to avoid it, but I knew deep down it would be our last meal as a family, so I went and sat at the table. She served my son and me, and we all ate together. I felt sad looking at my son's face. It was likely the last time he would share a meal with both his parents. I know I might be called selfish and prejudiced for destroying my happy family over one mistake from Dove, but I don't care what others think of me. I know when my son grows up, he will be glad that I chose my self-respect over my affection and emotions. It is important that a child grows up with content parents, even if they live separately, rather than frustrated parents trapped in a broken marriage. And our marriage was shattered the moment Dove became intimate with other men. After lunch, Dove took our son to his room for an afternoon nap. After putting him to sleep, when she returned to our bedroom, I was scrolling on my phone. She tried to touch me. I stopped her and asked if the STD reports had arrived. She said she had tested clean and started touching me again. Knowing it would be our last time, I gave in. That was the most passionate intimacy we had shared in a long time. After we were finished, I felt so guilty and sad, but also content to be with her. She was the only woman I had been with in the past 16 years. I loved her, and it broke me to my core to think that I was going to push her away from me forever. I also regretted having sex with her because it might have given her false hope of reconciliation. She fell asleep in my arms, as if she hadn't slept for many nights. I looked at her face and wondered how she could do this to us. I don't know when I dozed off while gazing at her lovely face. We woke up when our son knocked on the door. I opened the door for him. He played with us on the bed. It was such a moment of joy. At that instant, I genuinely felt like reconsidering my decision and giving our marriage another chance, but I suppressed it and got out of bed. It was already evening. I sat in the living room, waiting for my parents and in-laws to arrive. After a while, our parents were there. After everyone settled down, Dove called me into the kitchen and asked with intense eyes if I truly wanted to go through with this. I said yes. She then went outside and announced to everyone that she had something to reveal. She told them that she had been unfaithful to me at her friend's wedding, but it didn't mean anything. She loved me and would do anything for me. She went on to say that she had confessed this to me, and I wanted her to inform everyone about it. It happened so quickly that my parents initially thought it was a joke. I said it was not a joke and added that she hadn't confessed until I found the STD test bill in her purse. Her parents looked down in embarrassment and anger. My parents were also disheartened, but they didn't say anything. I told everyone that I also had something to say, and that was that I had filed for divorce. I pulled out the divorce papers and began reading the terms of the divorce. Dove tried to interrupt me, but I continued. I gave her the house where she and my son could reside while I moved out. We would both have joint custody of our son, and I would pay my portion of the child support. After reading it, I handed the papers to her. She gave me a disgusted look and said I had tricked her into this. She glanced at the papers and signed them immediately. Her parents stood up and left without a word. My parents also left, but as they departed, they asked if I wanted to move in with them for some time. I nodded and said I would consider it. Dove went to our son's room and locked it from the inside. Not only did she feel shamed in front of her parents and mine, but she felt defeated, realizing all those confessions and humiliations were for nothing. I packed my remaining belongings and left the house. I wanted to see my son, but I knew Dove wouldn't let me, which was why she had locked herself in his room. After that evening, I received no calls or texts from Dove. Approximately 45 days later, we appeared in court, where our divorce was settled amicably, as neither of us contested it. We didn't exchange any words and went our separate ways once it was over. It's been more than a week since the divorce was finalized. I've been busy finding a new house and settling in. We may cross paths because of our son, but our interactions will be purely transactional. I still feel hollow and frustrated because I know I also hurt and humiliated her. Perhaps we both received what we deserved. Unbelievable. Her claim of taking the STD test for his safety when her disloyalty created the entire situation. Who does she imagine herself to be? A savior. OP, you are absolutely justified. How could she inflict such pain on you? It's truly regrettable that you and your child endured this, but you shouldn't feel remorse or agitation. She brought this humiliation upon herself the moment she yielded, and as you mentioned, engaged with another man. She attempted to deceive you, to conceal her actions. These were truly contemptible deeds. You acted entirely correctly, prioritizing your son's welfare. which is far more than she can claim. What are your thoughts on OP's decisions after finding the STD test results? Would your approach have differed? Share your perspective in the comments below. Thank you for joining us today on our space. Make sure to like and subscribe and activate that notification bell so you don't miss our next video. See you soon.